Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into a fun video here today doing a Heisman ranking over the past 10 seasons. I will only be grading the players' Heisman season, and we're just going to be ranking them going back to 2014, I want to say. So it's 2014 to 2023. All of the Heisman seasons ranked worst to first, beginning with number 10, the worst Heisman season of the last 10 years, and it is Jayden Daniels. And guys, he was the Heisman this year. He kind of won it by default. Now, if you just look at the stats, you could make an argument Jayden Daniels had one of the two, maybe three best college football quarterback seasons of all time just based off of efficiency. But obviously, there's more to it when it comes to the Heisman. When it comes to these rankings, you have to put a big emphasis on wins and losses. Otherwise, a lot of players from the Big 12, back in those years where the Big 12 played no defense, they would have won the Heisman. But if you factor in wins and losses, Jayden Daniels starts off the year losing to FSU, not playing very well. You lose at Bama, you lose at Ole Miss. His only big win, I believe his only ranked win, you're a Heisman winner, you have one ranked win on the road at Missouri. Nothing against Daniels, but this is a very, very tough resume to look at. And then you also factor in the idea that he won the Heisman because he didn't play in his conference championship game. When you really think about it, with Bo Nix going into the conference championship weekend, he was the heavy favorite. He plays bad, and Daniels, who wasn't playing at all because he wasn't in the SEC championship, ends up winning it. So very good year for him, but he kind of backed his way into the Heisman, in my opinion. Moving on to number 9, it is Bryce Young. So Bryce Young won it a few years ago. Certainly he had a decent year, but I would say his biggest Heisman moment came in that Alabama-Auburn game. That was a game where Alabama and their offense had 3 points late in the fourth quarter. They end up winning 24-22 in quadruple overtime, and that was not a good Auburn team either. So Bryce Young, very nice year, 43 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, but we've seen other players do that and not win the Heisman. Justin Fields in 2019 had 41 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He didn't win it. So Bryce Young, I'm not going to say he wasn't worthy of a Heisman. Certainly he was, but it just wasn't the best year. They did win a lot, and that was Bryce Young's sophomore year, so that is, impressive winning it your second year in college football. Moving on to number 8, it is Caleb Williams. So Caleb Williams, he won it last year for USC. There's a few issues with Caleb Williams winning it. Certainly the stats are there, 37 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, the rushing ability, 10 total rushing touchdowns. When you look at the actual numbers and the game log, though, you can see 0-2 against Utah. That's rough for the resume. Also, in terms of ranked wins, he didn't have a single top 10 ranked win being in the Pac-12. So there's a few issues with Caleb Williams' Heisman run, but I do think he was worthy of it. Just kind of similar situation with Bryce Young. They just give it to the best quarterback. That's kind of it at this point. And Caleb Williams was the best quarterback, even though he did go 0-2 against Utah, and they did end up losing their Pac-12 championship game and didn't even make the playoffs. They had 2 losses that year, but it's a situation where who else are you going to give it to? Caleb Williams is obviously a crazy talent. You could make the argument that maybe I should have put this at number 10, but because they only had 2 losses, they did have several ranked wins. I'm going to have Caleb Williams' Heisman season come in at number 8. Moving on to number 7, it is Devonta Smith. So this is one I might end up regretting. I probably should have moved this one up higher. The reason I've got it at number 7 is because it happened during the pandemic, meaning you had the Pac-12, you had the Big 10 not even play a full schedule. So that's 2 conferences, and all those players basically completely eliminated from Heisman contention. Devonta Smith was ridiculous, though. He had almost 2,000 yards of receiving. It's interesting when people talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. possibly being in the Heisman race. These are the type of numbers you need to be in the Heisman race. Just 23 touchdowns. You know what's also weird? His longest touchdown in 2020 was only 66 yards. And that dude's an unbelievable deep threat. It felt like he caught 50 long touchdowns. But yeah, Devonta Smith, Mac Jones also had a ridiculous year. A lot of people don't remember Mac Jones had like some efficiency record. I think he has the number 1 best passer rating season in college football history in 2020. Now, there was a little bit of an asterisk next to it because there were no fans in the stands, but still, that is very impressive. Devonta Smith, to me, comes in at number 7. A receiver winning it is something that's really cool. Moving on to number 6, it is Lamar Jackson. So Lamar Jackson, the big knock on his Heisman season, the 3 losses for Louisville, losing late in the season, but still, what an amazing year when he ended up winning it as a sophomore. Kind of not great in terms of passing, 30 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, but the rushing is just completely out of control. 1,500 rushing yards and 21 rushing touchdowns, so 51 total touchdowns. Lamar Jackson, he's like the quintessential dual threat Heisman winner, carrying Louisville football to being relevant. Unbelievable dual threat, really good season, but I can't put him higher than number 6 because of those 3 losses and also the 9 interceptions. Moving on to number 5, it is Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray had a very strange college career. It's like he started one season at Oklahoma, he won the Heisman, and then he was the number 1 overall pick in the draft. But yeah, Kyler Murray had a crazy efficient year, one of those Lincoln Riley offenses, 42 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, a rating of basically 200. He also had 1,000 rushing yards, averaging 7 yards a carry, 12 touchdowns, led Oklahoma to the playoff. They immediately lost in the playoff. I believe Oklahoma right now is 0-4 in the playoff, but Kyler Murray, I remember that year. He was just an unbelievably efficient quarterback, extremely accurate, and that's why he went number 1 overall. So to me, Kyler Murray, I put him right in the middle at number 5 in terms of ranking Heisman seasons over the last 10 years. He really did. I mean, you could maybe say he should be lower because Lincoln Riley, it's kind of easy to be a quarterback in that offense, but his efficiency was just crazy good. Moving on to number 4, it is Derrick Henry, a running back at number 4. Yeah, Derrick Henry, just a ridiculous year in 2015. 2,200 rushing yards, almost 400 carries, averaging almost 6 yards a carry, 28 rushing touchdowns. The game logs are ridiculous. They ran Derrick Henry into the ground. Look at his last 2 games. 46 carries in a single game, 44 carries in the SEC championship. It was ridiculous. He had multiple games of over 200 yards. He had a stretch from October 17th to November 14th, 236 yards, 143 yards, 210 yards, 204 yards. Then he only had 68 yards against. Man, he really could have padded his stats against Charleston Southern. They barely gave him any carries, and then he just erupts again. Had a touchdown in every single game that Bama played throughout the regular season. Not great in terms of pass catching, but obviously Derrick Henry, he's a bulldozer, and it is a crazy season. He comes in at number 4 for me. At number 3, it is Baker Mayfield. In Baker's 2017 season, Mayfield's a guy that possibly could have, he had like 2 different Heisman seasons if you look at his 2016 and 2017 season. In 2016, Oklahoma lost 2 games early, so they kind of weren't relevant, and then they came back in 2017. They won the second half of the home and home with Ohio State, and Baker Mayfield just extremely efficient, almost a rating of over 200, 43 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, averaging 11.5 yards. His completion percentage was also over 70%, and you do have that huge win on the road in week 2. That's going to be good for your resume. You could make the argument and say, well, it's the Big 12. The defenses aren't very good. Baker Mayfield should be lower on your list, but you did beat number 11 Oklahoma State. Look at that game. 24 of 36 for 600 yards for Baker Mayfield, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. You beat TCU. So they had some quality wins on their resume, and they ended up making the playoff with 1 loss. Baker Mayfield comes in at number 3 in terms of ranking Heisman seasons. At number 2, it is Marcus Mariota. So this is going all the way back to the furthest year I could go, 2014. Marcus Mariota, just an unbelievable college quarterback. There's no denying it. Really, every year he was in college, but especially 2014, 42 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and this was back in 2014. Offenses weren't like they are now. I know it doesn't seem like that long ago, but if this was like today, he'd probably have like 55 passing touchdowns. He had a really good rating. He was impressive in terms of running the ball, really good dual threat, 770 yards, 15 rushing touchdowns, a total of 57 touchdowns overall and just 4 interceptions. Marcus Mariota is just the quintessential Heisman. He's got the name, he's got the moxie, he's calm. Oregon was the best team that year, or they were one of them. They ended up making the national championship, and he comes in at number 2. And then number 1, the best Heisman season over the past 10 years, it is Joe Burrow. You know, I don't think this is any question. Joe Burrow, the efficiency, the 60 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions, a quarterback rating over 200, starts at Ohio State, barely plays for 2 years, goes to LSU, kind of has an average year. They get Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator. You have Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and that death offense. I don't think there's any question Joe Burrow on pretty much everyone's list is going to be number 1. You could make an argument for a different number 2. Maybe I should have had Devonta Smith a little bit higher. Maybe I should have had, someone like Lamar Jackson a little bit higher, depending on how much you care about 3 losses. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.